Thank you again for attending tonight's Rock County Civics Academy program. Our ability to provide these presentations is solely dependent upon the financial support we receive from our sponsors and you, our faithful listeners. Our presenting sponsor is Havana Coffee on Milton Avenue. This program would not be possible without the ongoing support of the Italian House and Big Radio WCLO WJVL. Supporters include Ragnar Ltd. And Ragnar Software, the John Westphal family, Dan Plushik's Janesville News Report, American Awards and Promotions, Stockman Property Development LLC. If you believe in our mission, we welcome your financial support. Materials explaining our mission and financial support opportunities are available at the registration desk or by visiting our website, commonsenserockcounty.org. Rich?
Very good. Good evening, and welcome to this edition of the Rock County Civics Academy. Tonight we want to explore the question of doing development in Janesville. And the question really circles around, is it a gamble or is it a calculated risk? And to help us kind of define for each individual case which it is, joining me tonight, John Westphal, Westphal Electric. John, though, is here in his capacity as chair of the Children's Museum fundraising effort, which is a substantial investment into downtown Janesville and to the Janesville community. John, welcome.
Thank you.
And next to John, we've got Ben Thompson. Ben is here wearing a couple of hats. I will tell you that Ben came to Janesville not that many years ago, along with his company. They purchased the broadcast assets of Bliss Communications, and Big Radio picked up a handful of licenses, and he has been providing stewardship and guiding that investment, substantial investment, because he obviously believed in Janesville. But tonight I want to talk a little bit more, Ben, about your investment in real estate and some downtown development. So Ben, welcome.
Yeah, thank you.
And to my immediate left is Courtney Parakis, who is the owner of the Sugar Exchange. And the Sugar Exchange is one of those new businesses down in Block 42 that has been a blooming success. And she's in the process of trying to relocate and expand her offerings, and she's got her own story to tell tonight. So, Courtney, welcome.
Thank you.
Courtney, I want to start with you if we could. You have an amazing background, and none of it really fits into the context of being a female developer of not only a small business, but you're in the real estate business too. What brought you to Janesville, and what do you see as the future?
Well, so my husband actually brought me to Janesville. My first career I was in air traffic control, and my husband's a pilot, and so I was looking for a change in career. He was looking to get back to the Midwest where he was from. I said, that's fine, just not Illinois. So we ended up in Wisconsin. So it actually was kind of luck that we just happened into Janesville. And for us, it was one of those, I just remember, this is 10 years ago now, looking at Google. I had no idea what Janesville was or where it was or anything. And I'm like, oh, the downtown looks like it's going to be really cute. And then we got here and I was like, it's not so cute. So that's kind of that's how we started here in Janesville. And a decade later, we're still here and it's home now. So.
Good. Ben, you're a newcomer to the area, relatively speaking. You haven't been here long enough that you can say I'm an old-timer. I'm a fifth-generation Janesvillian. But there's a reason why you and your company invested in Janesville. And let's talk first the big picture, how Big Radio arrived here.
Yeah, so that would have been actually back in 2014. I was living down in Chicago. I was an analyst at a hedge fund in Evanston, Illinois. And the radio station 105.9 The Hog here in Janesville came up for sale, and what is WBEL as well down in Beloit came up for sale. And my dad owned 5 radio stations over in Monroe, and he called me and he said, hey, like, this would be a neat opportunity in that you could get back into the business if you wanted to, but you don't have to move back to Monroe. which is where I was from. You don't have to move back to Monroe and be Scott Thompson's son. You can move to Janesville and, buy these stations and be Ben Thompson. So that was end of 2014 when I did that, and I moved to Beloit at that point, which is where I currently live. And then in 2019, Skip Bliss called. He wanted to retire and sell his assets, his radio assets. So I bought WJVL and WCLO. That would have been in 2019. And it was, in reality, I guess why it was such a draw for us too is it's a pretty big population area. And again, coming from Monroe, community of 10,000, it seemed, Janesville 60,000, but there's 160,000 people in Rock County. It is one of the 200 in the top 250, I think, metropolitan areas in the country. There's a lot of people here, and it's not a bedroom community for Madison or for Rockford. It is a standalone community of 160,000 people. So it really kind of made a lot of sense from a business perspective for us to make an investment in a community like that had a diverse small business community. That's our bread and butter in the radio world. 90% of our clients are small business owners. So there's a lot of those in the area. And it just made a whole lot of sense from that perspective, this area.
Okay. And John Westphal, you born here, raised here, grew up, played football here, played football in Madison, took over the family company, and wow, what a story.
Yeah, I'm a product of my environment. So I'm born and raised here, lived here my whole life, other than 4 years of college. But yep, this is where I've always been. And I know we're talking about downtown. The thing I wanted to say is, I remember as a kid going downtown with my mom and dad and my siblings on Saturdays. Saturday late afternoon, early evening, Saturday night. It was pretty magical, and I remember it vividly. It was fun. I really looked forward to it. And so that's why I've always been interested in downtown from the time back in the early 90s when I was on the board of the Chamber of Commerce, Forward Janesville, and then on the city council. I've always been interested in downtown and riverfront development. And it's kind of because I was a little kid here running around downtown with my mom and dad.
And there's a host of stories you could be telling about your times growing up in
Yeah,
downtown Janesville prior to everything moving out to the mall.
Yeah, positive ones in about the downtown, and all really good things. Fun, happy people, a lot of hustle and bustle. So I could.
Yeah, and that's a whole nother story sometime, just to talk about that Arise project. Janesville was quite a booming place at one particular point in time, and it's wonderful to see it coming back. You, though, made an investment of time, talent, energy in returning. You left, you went to the big city, and you could have gone on in 101 different directions. Why did you choose to come back to Janesville?
Well, I mean, one of the reasons was when I graduated from college in May of 1982, we were in the depths of a recession, and I got rejected about like in every interview I did. I got out of the School of Business, and my dad offered me a job at the family business for not very high pay, but better than zero. So that's why I came here, and it turned out to be providential because, he died a short time later. So then I made the decision that, I'm in. So I'm going to be here. So partly it was a choice of a lot of pride in my family's business. It was started by my grandfather in 1931. So it wasn't like, God, I don't have a job, I guess I'll go back to the family farm. It really wasn't like that. I had a lot of pride in it and wanted to be part of it and see if it would work out for me. And even before my father passed away, I think I was pretty committed.
Ben, how much industrial intelligence gathering did you have to do before you decided this was a place to invest? And I know you had your start in Beloit, and Beloit and Janesville they're very different communities, but they're very much similar in some respects.
Yeah, I had a weekend I had a weekend coming to town. I stayed in Beloit at the Ironworks Hotel, which was at the time the only hotel,
Only
hotel
hotel in-
downtown Beloit. And I came up to downtown Janesville. I'm trying to think. I think I went to Looking Glass and Legends, and I thought, you know what, this is a place I could live. And I think I told my dad afterwards. I said, well, yeah, let's do this. This seems like a and I loved my time in Chicago. I loved my time at the hedge fund. A lot of fun. I miss the people I work with, but I wouldn't trade what I'm doing now for anything. I love this community. I love Rock County. I love downtown Janesville. I think you mentioned the swinging pendulum, if it were, from downtown out to Milton Avenue. In the 80s and 90s when everybody didn't want to be downtown, right? Now the pendulum is coming back, and you're seeing that in pretty much all local, smaller communities where now everybody wants to be back downtown, and it's really an exciting thing to be a part of.
Yeah. Courtney, again, your background is such that you could still be in Arizona, still in the tower, with the green screen that
Yes,
still
green
exists,
screens.
right?
Yes.
Yeah, but instead you're here, and you took a risk. You said at one point in time, I want to do something different.
Yeah.
How did the sugar exchange come about?
Well, so once we moved here, while I was working in air traffic, I had gotten a degree in graphic design and photography because in my free time I was bored. And so my idea when I got here was that that's what I was going to do. And I had a job lined up that fell through, and our next door neighbor worked for Edward Jones. And so out of necessity, she got me a job there, just making income. And then I was like, I actually kind of like this financing. So I ended up doing that for a time, but I'm kind of I like change. And at that point I was working at the Jones office downtown, and I was seeing this revitalization happen, and it kind of occurred to me, I was just like, there's a bunch of things this downtown doesn't have that it needs. We don't have an ice cream parlor. We don't have candy, like things, when you think about a thriving downtown, there's certain businesses you just expect to always see. It doesn't matter which downtown you go in the United States, you expect that there's certain things that are just going to be there. And we didn't have that. And at that point, I was also helping with the events with downtown Janesville. So that's kind of how I got into that aspect of it. And during 2020, during the pandemic, my grandfather passed away. And that was something we always did together, was candy stores. He had a horrible sweet tooth, and I was his excuse. And so I just kind of started going back to that thought process, and I was ready for a change, and told my husband, I'm like, what do you think of this idea, opening a candy store? And he's like, I think it's a great idea. Let's go for it. And 3.5, 4 years later, here we are. So
What's the first step that you take when you're diving into the development world and it's brand new and the connections aren't there, and who do you ask, or is there a textbook out there?
I wish. That actually was probably the hardest part, and the thing that I guess scream it from the rooftops the most is that it's really hard. It's like there's so many people I meet that have these great ideas for business, but it's like, how do you take that first step? The first step is the hardest, and then once you take a step, it's like, okay, well, I need to go this direction, but then I'm being told to go this direction, and it can be difficult. It can be hard to navigate that, especially whether it's Janesville or it's any city. It can be hard to navigate the permitting process, and trying to get ducks in a row. It kind of becomes like herding cats. So it's not an easy process, but I kind of WIBIC, which was a women in business organization here in Wisconsin. I connected with them and got a mentor, and so they were able to help me through some of that process. And the economic development director, Gail Price, and Nancy McDonald were able to be instrumental in helping me as well and point me in right directions. So I was thankfully able to kind of fall into the right people.
Then you, by vocation, probably were in a better position than most as an analyst with a hedge fund company that is in the business of trying to find out the strengths, the weaknesses, and the ways in which to maximize the dollar. Did that background and experience come to play in this at all?
Yeah, you know, you can model out all you want, but you know, the first unexpected thing, you know, oh, you're gonna need a new water main for the fire suppression system that you're gonna need to put in. Like, you just can't model some of this stuff, and all of a sudden the budget just kind of explodes. So I mean, yeah, whatever you think you're gonna spend, like double it. And that's probably going to be closer to at least that's from this, you know, very small sample size of the one project that I'm currently working on is like. But so I mean, I did model out, you know, the investment, the, you know, what I thought I could rent the units for, the return on investment, but you know, I don't think that helped as much as you know I thought maybe going into it. So.
And the surprises, and there's always the surprise in any time that you're dealing with any type of construction, when you're doing something as a renovation and then complicate it with an old building.
Absolutely.
And building codes that don't necessarily always line up with that old building.
That's the variable, right? That is the, you know, new construction is a different thing, but when you're taking a building built in 1853 and, you know, stripping it down to nothing and completely redoing it, like, there's obviously going to be things that come up that you're just not going to know. You can, you know, you can go through you can get an inspection, you can do all of that, but there's still going to be hurdles that come along.
There's some that would argue that it's a learning experience not only for the developer but also for the regulators. With each of the building experiences that they have, it's an eye opener for them. And John Westphal, from your perspective, Westphal Electric has been part of a lot of projects in the Midwest. And I would suspect that you could tell horror stories about the challenges of trying to do certain types of construction projects.
Well, I wouldn't say horror stories, Rich, because that's kind of the challenge, and that's kind of one of the motivators of why people gravitate to construction. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we've been in a lot of projects that are challenging, difficult, hard, unexpected, a lot of changes, a lot of stuff like that. But unlike Ben, I have a lot of experience, more experience with dealing with this stuff, and I kind of know what to expect going into it, so I'm not as surprised of what we find.
Do you ever have to deal with a hard-nosed owner's rep like me that says there are no such things as change orders?
You would be a pushover compared to the owner's reps that I usually have to deal with. Like taking candy from a baby with you.
I've always said I am a softie. I am definitely a softie.
There's a lot of hardies out there.
Yes.
You're a softie.
And I think some of those things that pop up is also what it makes it, you know, like you said, exciting.
Yeah.
You know, like if it were just like cut and dry, I think it would be, if it were extremely straightforward, probably be pretty boring at that point. You know,
Right.
so it adds some excitement to it on what are we gonna find next. You know, but then it just makes the payoff even that much sweeter at the end. You know, when it all comes together.
Well, and there's that school of thought that says if it were easy, everybody would be doing it.
Yeah.
And quite honestly, not everybody's doing it for a lot of reasons. The equation that we wanted to talk about tonight is if you don't necessarily know what you're doing, you haven't put a plan together, some could argue that you're going to take a gamble. If you've got a plan and you've got a vision, that becomes more of a calculated risk. And is there a mix in there that as you dive into projects that require a lot of TLC, particularly old buildings, that is there that mix of hope that it's going to pay off, but I know I'm in a gambling situation?
I think.
Courtney?
Yeah. I mean. Oh, sorry.
Okay.
No, that's okay. For sure. I mean, there's, you know, you hear about these amazing business ideas out there and that they failed, and it's like, well, why you know, like they had all the right things, but there was something missing, something happened, and sometimes it is the unexpected, and sometimes it's, you know, things that you just can't plan for. But it is more difficult when you're, you know, when you are revitalizing an older building is, turn over that rock and what's going to come out from underneath it. And when you're on a tight budget to begin with, sometimes the roaches that come out are just a little too overwhelming.
I think you can put together, I mean, this was applicable both when we bought WJVL and WCLO and also the 109 East Milwaukee project, is you can put together all the plan, you can run all the numbers, you can just be as confident as you can in the business plan and everything, but then at the end, when it comes to starting it, you are jumping off the cliff. You know, and you're just making sure that all that preparation and planning, is a good parachute for on the way down, and there's no holes in it.
I always say it's kind of like bungee jumping, like it's nerve-wracking. You'll have fun once you do it, but it's nerve-wracking. But that parachute or that bungee jump it could snap too. You
Just gotta trust the guy who's measuring it out to make sure there's enough bungee there.
Yeah. John, you're in the middle of a big fundraising activity that it's going to go on the books as being one of the bigger fundraising activities that's been undertaken by the community, and you're taking either a calculated risk and a bit of a gamble that the community of Janesville believes enough in the cause that it's going to be successful. Where are you at in that project?
Yeah, first, I would say this. When you use the word gamble, that would imply that there's luck involved. And I don't think when it comes to development, commercial real estate development, business development, like these guys are talking about, I think luck plays a small part. It's more about calculated risk, measuring the risk, having contingencies to cover that risk, and then making a decision based on your risk profile and your risk tolerance, how far you want to jump in or jump off with a bungee jump. We are at $5,044,000 pledged and donated so far, with an initial goal of raising $8 million. $8 million will be up until the Woodman Center, who's now at $9 million. $8 million will be the largest amount ever raised in Janesville, and I've raised a lot of money on a lot of projects in Janesville. I don't know so much as it is a gamble of what the people in the city of Janesville would think. It's more like Janesville, I believe Janesville's approach and vision is expanding. I think people here are thinking a little bit bigger. I've heard many times in the past, we don't need that, or we don't deserve that. This is Janesville. We can go to Chicago, Milwaukee, Madison, Rockford, something, and we don't really need that. I think it's changing a little bit, where people are thinking, there's no reason why we can't have that. I mean, hey, like Ben says, here in River City, we're pushing 65,000 people. We can have that kind of stuff. And I think people are expanding and realizing that, and they're investing more in projects like ours. So, but to your point, this is $8 million is a big number, right? So where'd that come from? Well, it wasn't Joe Stottleman and Angus Young and I sitting down and doing the best we can of ciphering how much this construction's going to cost us. It was me sitting in a room with people like all you guys and saying, all right, I'll do this, okay? Whoever wants to do this, take a step forward. So I took a step forward, and then nobody else did. I said, okay, I'll do it. I'm going to need a lot of help. How much can we raise? How much do you think I can raise doing this? Because it's a great story to tell. A children's museum is a great story. And they said, well, we arm wrestled, said $6 million. And I said, it's not going to do it. We can't build it for $6 million. And a long story short, we arrived at $8 million as a stretch goal. Okay, $8 million. That's the goal. Can we build a children's museum for $8 million? Yeah. What kind of children's museums can be? Better than one we have right now, which is nothing. But if I raise $10 million, it'd be better. So we're shooting for 8. I'd like to get 10. Okay? And we'd spend, to enhance the museum, with every dollar we spend, we will make this a better museum. So yeah, it's a big undertaking. And one more thing, I want to let people hear this, I've been on a lot of capital campaigns, and I've raised a lot of money on different projects. And to ask somebody to give their hard-earned money to your project is it's humbling in itself, okay? Because you have your hand out for something you believe in. But when people give and they donate, it's more humbling. And I get great satisfaction out of that, about how generous people are in Janesville and how they open their heart and they open their wallet. They don't have to do it, and yet they do. And it's a very gratifying activity if you believe in the mission. And people have been so gracious and have been so generous so far. Need a couple of aircraft carrier donors, okay? But so far, you know how you eat an elephant, Rich, right?
Absolutely, one little small bite at a time.
That's it. That's what
And
we're
there's a
doing.
lot of people that are trying to chew on that elephant. There's a lot of people
Yeah.
out there fundraising
Yeah,
right now.
there are, but I'd say this too. Like we said before, I'm a resident of Janesburg, right? Okay, well, what happens if the Woodman Center happens, the Children's Museum happens, the Boys and Girls Club happens, they put a new steeple on St. Patrick's Church, St. John's Vianney just raised a bunch of money. I mean, all these things, I'm a beneficiary. So I'm not in competition with anybody. I'm just hoping that
There's
the
enough
rising
dollars
tide
to go
lifts all
around.
boats.
Yeah, there's enough elephant out there to.
That's it, yeah.
It's a remarkable project, and we'll come back because there's some stories that I think would be important to share. Again, I want to go back to the challenge. It's a learning experience when you start tearing into an old building, and boy, the surprises they pop up. You can plan for everything, but the surprises they pop up, and hopefully you have relationships that allow you to do some creative problem solving with all those that are involved with you. Let's start with you, Ben, if we could. You've got to have a close working relationship with your partner. In this case, your partner's the city of Janesville.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And you have to have a good working relationship, I think, with everybody involved. Contractors and the people doing the work, and the city is obviously that's a good way of putting it. It is a partner in it, and from beginning, from TIF deals and things like that, all the way through the end, through final occupancy. They're there the entire way, yeah.
There's someone that would argue that's the one constant that you have to deal with.
That's very true.
For better or for worse,
For
that's
better,
the one constant.
For better or for worse, and if you keep them involved, I think is the key. There are times where, on these old buildings in particular, it takes a little creativity to work together on them, and that's been really important.
I think it's crucial to move any project forward that you very early on identify your partners and make sure the partners are all on the same page. And if you don't do that, then I think you're inclined to run into more problems than the average Joe or Jane really needs to run into. What's your experience, Courtney?
With the city?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, uh-huh. It's a tale of two cities. There's the city that is so excited to have this new business. And then there's the other city that doesn't care that you are there. Mm-hmm. And that's been my experience. I have nothing but amazing things to say about half of the city and how they've cultivated and want you there and do everything in their power to make that happen. And the other half that is indifferent. And that's the half that unfortunately you tend to deal with more often than not. And sometimes that can become the biggest challenge in creating a business or expanding a business or doing anything, is dealing with that side of the city. And I understand, the legality behind some of it, but sometimes it's like, it feels overly challenging more than it needs to be sometimes. So that has been my experience.
Yeah, I want to pursue that a little bit more in depth with both you, Courtney, and with Ben, because Partnerships are key, and I look around and I see so many long-term projects that are now suddenly coming to fruition. And you have to ask yourself the question, the sheer tenacity it takes sometimes to outlast some of the regulators is a quality that maybe is a prerequisite to being a good developer. We'll find out when we come back after a brief break. This is the Rock County Civics Academy. We're enjoying an old building built in 1906, the Venison and Lane Bakery of all things. And we'll be back with more from our guests after this brief timeout.
Thank you again for attending tonight's Rock County Civics Academy program. Tonight we are at the Batterman and Associates Bridges Conference Center. Batterman, engineers, surveyors, and planners located in Beloit, Janesville, and Elkhorn. We'd like to thank them for being our host tonight. Our ability to provide these presentations is solely dependent upon the financial support we receive from our sponsors and you, our faithful listeners. Our presenting sponsor is Havana Coffee on Milton Avenue. This program would not be possible without the ongoing support of the Italian House and Big Radio, WCLO, WJVL. Supporters include Ragnar Ltd. And Ragnar Software, the John Westphal family, Dan Plushik's Janesville News Report, American Awards and Promotions, Stockman Property Development, LLC. If you believe in our mission, we welcome your financial support. Materials explaining our mission and financial support opportunities are available at the registration desk or by visiting our website, commonsenserockcounty.org. And back to the Bridges Conference Center. It's up to you, Rich.
Thank you. Before the break, we were just starting to get into some of the foibles, the fun, the challenges, and the specifics of doing development in Janesville. And as I start thinking about it, we hit upon the word partnership, and it being so crucial going in. And then tenacity also comes to mind. In your particular case, Courtney, you've also, from just sheer gender issue, have had to deal with the fact that the potential sources of capital to get you started sometimes would suggest that, come back when you're successful and maybe we can get you a business relationship loan. That's an obstacle that not everybody faces. How did you overcome that challenge?
It's a hard challenge because it's, I can't show you I'm successful till you help me create, to create that success. And that's challenging. And I was fortunate enough to be in a financial position where my husband and I ended up taking a second mortgage on our house instead of doing a small business loan, because we went to 5 different banks and not a single one of them was willing to lend to us because we were unknown. We were, we didn't have, and I understand that, but it's like, how does a small business start if it's not watered? If you can't get the seed going, it's difficult to do. And thankfully we were in a financial position to find a different way. But that part was very challenging, and to this day it's still challenging. 3 years in, we had a bank that's like, you haven't been in business long enough, so they wouldn't lend to us. And it's like, well, what's long enough for you? Because it feels like an eternity. So that it's a challenge.
So finding capital is a universal problem. It's a universal challenge. Ben, you've been in that business on the other side of the ledger, where you're trying to assess risk. As an analyst with a company that you were with, you were assessing risk and trying to determine, is this the right project to take on that we can turn the profit that we need?
Yeah, I mean, John kind of mentioned it earlier, right? With gambling, risk and reward, right? I mean, that is the key component to it. Is life is all about risk. Risk is everywhere. It's just, is it going to be worth the reward? right? And I think that's also, back on the regulators component of it. Sometimes, my frustration sometimes is, yes, we can make this, 100% the way that a new build would be done. Given that this is building in 1853, it's going to cost this much to do that. But we could make it 98% the way a new build would be and save half the cost, right? That's just another way of looking at, risk and reward. And you're totally right that, it's the chicken or the egg when it comes to financing for new small businesses. We're fortunate to have very strong relationships with our lenders, but I know I talk with our lenders all the time, but if everybody was able to do everything in cash, there'd be no point in you being here, So, you have to kind of take a risk on new businesses every once in a while, and if they were to, I bet you would probably be loyal to them for 30 years. We're still loyal to the first bank we ever bet that took a risk on us. And we're still loyal to this day to them. It's all about building that relationship. From their perspective, they need to also kind of figure that in to their risk and reward calculation.
And part of the difficulty there is I'm going to blame it on the fact that we don't have many locally owned banks anymore, and those first bankers that probably you or your dad worked with in Monroe or Freeport, they were local banks.
And they still are. And we're very fortunate, in Greene County, there's a lot of very strong local community banks. And you're right, that is something, I guess, that is,
difference.
That is a difference in a larger city.
I have to go back, Courtney, because in another part of my life, once in a while, I fill in as a talk show guest host on WCLO. And I've done a couple of interviews with other women in business. And I think of two in particular. One is now a very successful developer and owner operator of a retail restaurant facility, and in the past she's had spas and salons, and she's doing okay, and she's in the middle of a project to do an expansion, and it's an exciting time. Mm-hmm. Another one that I worked with is probably the most exclusive spa in the region, and she's doing remarkably well, and she had her start, actually she worked at Mercy with me. But the common thread is they faced a unique set of challenges that, well, Ben or John, you guys didn't face. And tenacity seemed to be ultimately what carried them through. And in the case of one of them, it was a dad that had a deeper pocket than normal, and in the other case, she had family in Albania that they decided investing in Janesville was a good idea. Mm-hmm. How do you make those things work?
So I will say my experience, things are turning a lot. My husband initially, we intended to be 50-50 on our LLC, and it was a lot better for me to be the 100% owner of our business. As a female owner, there's opportunities that are afforded to me now that did not exist for many, many years that definitely exist now. I mean, there's loans that I can apply for as a female that I couldn't apply for if I was a male. There's, business groups, WIBIC, it's specifically for women in business. There's a lot of opportunity, I think, that is, if you look, I think it's actually pretty amazing. The downtown business owners of Janesville are predominantly women. And I think it's pretty amazing that, that we've gone to that extent. I will say that I like to eventually see it where personally, where it doesn't matter. Male, female, black, white, Asian, it shouldn't matter. If you want to start a small business, our community should support you. It should not matter. But as a female, I will see, when I was very naive when I first got out of college thinking that sexism doesn't exist anymore. And my first job taught me very much that it definitely does. And but not everyone. And so to approach it from that standpoint of dealing with a case by case basis, and I've dealt with it in one particular situation going into this business it was a banking situation, and it was just a quick conversation of, all right, well, let's move on to the next bank, because why would it want to do business anyways? But generally speaking, I would say in this environment, in this day and age, it's so much easier to be a female business owner than it used to be.
Yeah, I think for the sake of our audience too, it'd be important if you'd share with us, Courtney and then Ben, the breadth and scope of what you're trying to do. Tell us about the Sugar Exchange and currently the project that you're in and the project that you're moving from.
Yeah, so the intention, the whole reason that this came about is that we noticed, with the economy and everything else, the downtick in sales, and so our opinion of it was to kind of look at all avenues, like what's causing this, and then the intention was, okay, well, let's sometimes, if you make that snowball bigger, it's going to roll faster, and if it's rolling faster, then you put more into it, you get more out of it. And so that's kind of where the intention for this project came from, was to kind of change our locality for purposes of foot traffic, but also to add different avenues to our space that we don't currently offer, coffee and events, things like that. So that's where that initially came from, is how do we capture more audience more frequently on a more regular basis.
So you're packing up shop and you're gonna try and move to a new location in the hopes that there's more traffic.
Exactly. Yeah. That, and as much as people love sweets, they don't come in every day for sweets, but they will come in every day for coffee. So
If you could
things
just
like
get
that.
the American Dental Association to endorse you, I mean,
Right?
Yeah.
that would make a world of difference. Ben, your project is kind of an exciting project, and everybody has something that they ought to be particularly proud of, and everybody is hopefully going to have in their development experience a first, something that's pretty darn exciting. And now, this is in jest, honestly. You are the proud owner of the first heated sidewalk in downtown.
I'm the sidewalk guy. Yeah.
You broke ground.
I did. Yeah, we set a precedent on this. Yeah, so like the scale and scope of the building in itself was a totally underutilized property in downtown Janesville. At least in my opinion, when I purchased it and when I first looked at it, the first floor was, pretty not great retail space. The drop ceilings, drywall, carpet, and everything. Like it just wasn't nice. Second floor, third floor, completely, pretty bare and just a lot of possibility. And so I just kind of saw the possibility right away, and I thought like this would be a really good addition. It's a prime spot right on Milwaukee Street, right next door to Draft House, across the street from Johnson Bank. High traffic area. This could look so much better, and it could be such a better building in downtown and contribute in that way. Aesthetically, the tenants in the building could be better, and everything along with that. So that's where this all started. And third floor, with everything else going on in downtown Janesville, I really like spending a lot of time in downtown Janesville. I work downtown, and I thought, how cool it would be to live downtown and be able to walk to Sugar Exchange every day for coffee, right? And so, like, the third floor will be my residence. That's where I'm going to move. Second floor will be apartments for tenants. Classy Rascals is moving in, and we'll be opening next week on the first floor. And then the heated sidewalk you mentioned, we were doing some in-floor radiant heat, and adding the sidewalk component to it was going to be minimal cost, additional, to do that. And so I just kind of brought it up to the city, like thinking, hey, like this is what I'm planning on doing, because the road's already ripped up. The sidewalk's already going to be replaced. When it's replaced, this is what I'm planning to do. And I didn't anticipate it being so difficult to get this done, in all honesty. And I think big part of it was it had not been done before. I think Blackhawk Community Credit Union, when they built the new branch on the south side, had proposed doing it and scrapped it after the city said, no, like you can't do that. and I just kind of kept asking why. And we went before the city council and made our case and wound up doing that. So, and they agreed to it. So we'll have the first heated sidewalk now in downtown, and we'll see if other businesses, as they replace their sidewalk, if they follow or not. It's not a completely new technology. City Hall has it, and that was something else that we found out through the entire process. Was it's in the front of City Hall, so works really well for them, and we're looking forward to it working really well for us here this winter when the snow starts flying.
John Westphal, you have you've served along with many others as a member of the city council, and the city council is in that position where they oftentimes are trying to articulate a vision for where downtown or the city as a whole is going to go, and they ultimately set the rules, the regulations, and the pace of development. But that's a slow, arduous process to move change through any elected political body. What's your experience there, John?
Well, I'd like to say first, Ben Thompson showed you can beat City Hall.
Yeah.
I mean, look at our current elected officials, city and the county, and the ones that I've known in my adult life are all genuine people who have, they're not single issue activists. They're thinking, it's an at-large position. They want the city to be better. And they're usually they're compassionate people. And they don't want to see roadblocks for people like Courtney and Ben. But they also don't want to just be like a bee in a bottle and fly all over. They want to make sure that the decisions they're making are smart for the long term and don't set a future council or future city up for doing something that's stupid. I know why the city, and Ben knows now why the city forbade heated sidewalks, and there was good reasons for that. Okay, well, things have changed. And so now the city, the council listened, so did the administration, and smart people, reasonable people like Ben convinced them. So it's not a surprise to me. It's it just takes some time, right? There's no reason to do massive change unless something is massively wrong. So it's usually little steps, and things end up getting better. I don't want to get into the politics of it, but I understand why the city council decided to go back to the standard rules about outdoor dining downtown. I understand that. That's sensible to me and logical. They're not trying to hurt any business. They're just trying to make sure that they're doing what they were elected to do. I got it. I don't think it's a step back. Things like that. That's how it works.
Yeah. Well, it's a challenge in this day and age to find people who are willing to take on that task, to sit at that dais and make those decisions that aren't necessarily easy decisions in all cases.
Yeah, I'd like to comment too about the city and code authority stuff. I work with code authorities in many communities in many states. Okay, I have a lot of experience, and so I have a pretty good idea of what to expect. For the most part, they are smart, intelligent people who know more about the specifics than I do. I mean, I argue with some code authority, electrical inspector about the National Electrical Code. Usually they win. And it's like that for all of them. And they don't get a great kick out of, puffing their chest out and slapping the little man down. They don't. They usually like to be an advocate and take some kind of credit for your great new sugar exchange. But there's ones that are problems, right? And I think as long as you're reasonable and you're explaining what you're trying to accomplish, and you're not trying to beat up on them and argue with them, and have them give you logical arguments back, usually reasonable people can end up coming up with solutions. If it's such that what you want, we just don't do, and these are the reasons why, you have to put sprinklers in this space. We don't want the building to burn down and people to die. So you have to put sprinklers in there as much as you wouldn't like to spend the money on it. Well, the people decided that that's what we want, and you kinda gotta go along with that. But for the most part, I've found, at least in the city of Janesville, very, really trying to be an advocate for development and stuff to happen. But that's my story.
And there is a lot of logic behind. I remember I didn't realize, I kept saying, why can't we just run the electrical for the third floor in the second floor ceiling? Like, what's the big deal? Like, we're having to do all this exposed conduit and everything. Well, then they were able to, I thought that was, I didn't understand, right? Then they explained, well, if the fire department comes in and has to start cutting through stuff on the second floor, and they shut off the breaker to just the second floor, not realizing the third floor is running through there, they could have a huge issue. Okay, that makes sense. Run the conduit on the third floor, right? It's things like that it's as much educating ourselves as it is educating them sometimes on why we may want to do something. It takes that dialogue and education both ways.
It's an amazing thing when a development project happens in such a fashion that you know there's going to be surprises, but you work your way through those surprises.
Yeah.
You know there's going to be challenges, and you work yourself through those challenges. And by and large, from my experience in Janesville, if you can establish that partnership with the city going in, things seem to run a lot smoother. Is that's your experience across the board?
If you tell the truth, usually people can develop a partnership with you. If you worry about trying to keep your lies straight, you're gonna have problems. And if you're gonna try to, beat somebody up at City Hall, they're the ultimate authority, they're gonna win. I mean, they're City Hall. But I think, as long as you're always being logical and asking questions like Ben says, and asking why, and you tell the truth, explain what you're trying to get accomplished, what your budget is, things like that, then usually you have good success. There's times you run into code officials or development officials in municipalities that are not all that, that don't have all that much integrity. But there's ways to get them, to call them out. And it works many times. It works. Because you find that their colleagues won't cover for them. Their colleagues know, and so do their bosses. So it usually gets cleaned up. They're usually not tolerated for very long.
It's funny, it brings back memories. I did a lot of development through the years for one of my previous employers, and I did a lot of development in many communities across northern Illinois and southern Wisconsin, and one of the early questions was, how do you do business in this particular town? And I said, this is how you do business in this particular town. And then the authority person said to me, well, are you going to do business that way? And I said, not hardly. It'll never happen that way. There's a way around that particular sort of obstacle, and you're right. There are those instances where there's problems, and if you face them going in, or if you know them going in, you find resolutions to it. You can get things done, and that's been my experience. You can get things done. Sometimes it takes a lot of patience, and sometimes it takes a lot of reminders to keep an open mind. But by and large, people want to work with you, it is my experience, as opposed to work against you on something. And in spite of the fact that it raises your blood pressure on occasion. Yeah. Courtney, you are in the throes now of fighting another challenge, and that is we're coming out of a pandemic. We're trying to do a recovery. You had a budget. You now discovered that construction costs have escalated.
Yeah.
What does that do for a project like yours?
Well, the sound of screeching brakes. So, one of the things that we're finding is, inflation has hit hard and costs have escalated quickly. So you come to the table with a reasonable budget based on your knowledge, but the fact is that knowledge is changing too rapidly with the environment, with everything going on, and So we've run into very quickly some challenges to our budget. And more than anything, what's interesting right now is the Small Business Administration, like, you know, where they've got caps on certain things, they haven't really caught up with the fact that the inflation is kind of, you know, like, oh, you should be able to do this for this. Well, that was true 4 years ago, but all of a sudden it's not very true now. So we're running into, between an old building that's has, you know, repairs that were unforeseen and costs that have escalated quickly, we're kind of doing a halt really quickly to kind of reevaluate where we're at with everything. You know, because at the end of the day, you got to be smart. You got to be safe. And you know, and financially speaking, for me, you know, as a former financial advisor, at the end of the day, you've got to make sure that you are secure. And I've seen one too many times where people have lost their livelihoods, lost their life savings, doing something. So we are taking a quick pause to reevaluate everything, and then we'll be back to see where we end up. But yes, unfortunately, that inflation has been quite the kicker this year. So
I'd say to Courtney and your listeners too, complete serious, it's not getting any cheaper.
no,
So it's the least expensive you will find construction cost is 5 minutes from now.
Yep.
It's gonna go up tomorrow and next month, next year, so if you're gonna do something, now'll be the time.
yeah,
Well, and somebody along the way said that we're now paying 8% interest rates on mortgages, a 30-year mortgage. And the fact of the matter is, that's closer to what the norm had been historically than when we were in the opposite end of that and we were getting them for a deuce and a quarter.
We got used to free money, and money shouldn't necessarily be free.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 What's that old rule that somebody said is the banker, it's 3, 3, and 3. 3% is the interest I'm gonna charge, 3% is what I'll pay you on your passbook savings, and 3 is when I've got my tea time. or something like that.
Yeah.
As you try and model the financial implications of what you do, and Ben, you mentioned we try and model, and even the best models, they're not perfect. What do you end up doing as you recalculate? And I'm guessing in your project you've had to recalculate once or twice.
Yeah, I have. I've had to recalculate both on the cost side, but I've also been able to kind of recalculate on the rental side. You know, this project, I think I bought the building, I think 2 years ago now. So I mean, a lot's changed. Then you mentioned inflation, the cost has gone up, but so have rents. You know, the rents that I can, you know, charge on the apartment side of the equation. And you know, I remember when I was at, you know, Magnetar, the models that we would use there were extreme. You know, you're talking hundreds, if not thousands, of data points into these. And I keep mine now like fairly simple, because I find the more variables you have in it, the more you are tempted to tweak it to find the desired result that you want. Right?
Sound like pollsters.
Yeah. So keep it kind of simple, right? Cost, you know, your revenue, basic expenses, profit, and build it, be very conservative with those inputs. But I'm just a little cautious, I guess, of trying to have the bias of it, where it's like, I want this desired result, and if I just tweak that one number or these 5 numbers a couple of times, you know, I'll get there. That's not necessarily realistic.
Yeah.
We've got just a couple of minutes left, and in the time we've got left, I'll ask each of you the same question, basically. You've kind of presented a picture of where you are with your project today, and we've explored the question of gamble versus calculated risk. And 2-part question: when do you see your current project coming to fruition, and what's your vision for 5 years from now in Janesville? So who would like to dive on that one?
I'll go, because it's not that complicated. To set up the answer, here's what I want to say. I believe that a museum, a children's museum or any kind of civic museum, belongs downtown. There's been push on us and across the country to locate children's museums, co-locate them with Things like the Woodman Center kind of thing. But we're gonna be open for children regardless of their economic status. We wanna be close enough to the 4th Ward, so if there's disadvantaged kids there, they get to come for free. Families can belong for free. That stuff belongs downtown. Now, if it's Courtney's, Ben's, and John's Antique Car Museum, for us to show off our cars and try to pay for them, that should be downtown. But things like ours should be downtown. And frankly, everybody on our board would not be involved if this were not going to be downtown. Janesville's downtown is going to be gentrified. It's happening. These people are a great example. But there's always been people like Courtney and Ben, my whole life, who have invested in downtown. Maybe not a huge groundswell, but hopefully now it's a huge groundswell, and I think it's really gonna change. For us, trying to raise $8 to $10 million, that our group is. We're hoping to get that done end of January. For various things that we're learning right now, it might not happen. We might have to have our campaign open. We can't afford a debt service payment. We can't afford a mortgage. We have to have all the money up front in pledges or donations and use those pledges as collateral to get a bridge loan. And we're designing it right now, once we get done with the design and once we get done with, raising as much as we need to, it'll take about a year. God willing, we'll open sometime in 2025. I used to say early 25, now I'm pushing that out a couple months.
Very good. Ben?
So as far as my project goes, by the end of next week, Jess at Classy Rascals will be open on the 1st floor, and then the 2nd and 3rd floors will be finished. We're looking at by the end of the year. So
You're getting occupancy on time and within.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yes, we're going for occupancy Friday.
Excellent.
What's that, day after tomorrow? So, yes, we're very, very excited. We already have another appointment set up for next Tuesday, just in case. Yeah, and then the 2nd and 3rd floors will be by the end of the year. As far as
And so hopefully by, say, 5 o'clock on Friday, we'll see white smoke emanating.
Yeah. Yep, exactly. So, 5 years from now, we decided, we made a very conscious decision to locate Big Radio's offices downtown back in 2019, 2020. We could have, when we went to consolidate the stations we already owned here in Janesville and JVL and CLO into one office, like we could have moved it really anywhere. We decided to keep it downtown in the One Parker Place building because we really do believe in downtown. That's why I'm also doing this project. And I think that comes from growing up in Monroe. I was very fortunate growing up in Monroe, always having a very vibrant downtown square business community. And seeing that and what a diverse group can do, right? You mentioned most of the downtown business owners being women. There's other downtowns in the state, in the area, that are maybe a little more run by kind of one group. Here we have 3-4 dozen different people all coming together with their own unique vision that is collectively known as Downtown Janesville. And I think that is a very strong base for future growth. And all those individuals coming together and just elevating things even further. And we welcome even more people downtown, like the Children's Museum and everybody else coming and doing their own unique concept downtown.
I forgot to add, 5 years from now, we're gonna have 100,000 visitors showing up right across the street from my friend Courtney's candy store.
And Courtney's gonna have to have a really good supplier.
Yeah.
Courtney, fruition and 5 years from now.
So actually, to wear a different hat for 5 years from now is part of, I sit on the board for Downtown Janesville Inc. And we're the organization that kind of helps activate and beautify downtown. And I'm really excited with what we've been accomplishing and doing with that organization. We hired our first full-time employee this year, and Elena's amazing. She's doing an incredible job. We're adding a whole weekend of Halloween events next year to our calendar. So I'm really excited to see with 5 years with the Children's Museum and all these new businesses that are going in and that groundswell there. But on top of that, at all of our wonderful events we have, and as the chairperson of Flannel Fest, it's going to be a whole weekend event in 5 years. So, so wearing a different hat from that perspective. But I'm so excited to see and continue seeing everything that's happened in downtown. Like I mentioned at the very beginning of this, when I first saw downtown 10 years ago, I was like, ugh, okay. But this is a place that I'm so proud to bring my out of town visitors to now. Like I want you to come see what we've created. And I know, it's been here for many, many years, but it's great to see that, gentrification that's happening and everything that's going on. So I'm love to put the fast forward and see what it looks like 5 years from now.
It would be kind of fun at some point in time for downtown Janesville to pull together some of the longtime developers in town with the new developers in town and have an extended conversation and
Share war stories.
and share war stories, and more importantly, the battles that they won and why.
Yeah.
Because we learn best when we are able to avoid making the same mistakes others have made. Frankly, we don't have enough time in a lifetime to make all the mistakes that I could make. So learn from others in that process. John Westphal, Westphal Electric, and chair of the Children's Museum Project, thank you for your time. Ben
Thanks for
Thompson,
having me.
always enlightening. By golly, I'm watching that project, and it's exciting. And Courtney, really a pleasure.
Thank you.
Best of luck with this going forward. It's neat that you have collectively a vision for downtown that needs to be talked about, needs to be shared, and it's only going to be successful if folks like you and Jim Grapp stay in the game and are willing to take that calculated risk. With that, we will continue the conversation for anybody that's interested tomorrow at 2 at Havana Coffee. Otherwise, we're off onto other adventures. So thank you so very much for your time. Good night.